the number go up. So while you all are filling out the poll, so you can go ahead and go to the first or the next slide after that. Just to share with you all what we're going to cover today. We'll start with some welcome introductions. You all should have gotten started on the pre-training poll. We'll bring that QR code back up here in a second. And then we're going to hear from folks across the division who are going to share ideas around the guiding frameworks for service excellence, some behavioral concepts that we can, kind of keep in our back pockets as we think about how we put some of these best practices into action. And we will wrap those first 4 bullet points in the first 30 minutes so that the discussion and the post-training assessment will be things that you would do in that last 15 minutes. So if you're here for the long haul today, we'll get through all of these bullet points in this training and we'll be done around 11:45. But if you do have to hop off at 11:30 because that was the time we had originally put aside for our division meeting, then go ahead and do that. And when you join for the discussion sections that we'll have available on Engage to sign up, you'll complete the post-training assessment after you've participated in the discussion. So we can do, Sue, if you want to go to the next slide, if you haven't had a chance to, we can fast forward one more. If you haven't had a chance to do the pre-training poll, go right ahead. Before I dive into the content, a quick, just a couple ground rules for the training. Feel free to use the chat for questions, comments, interactions. We're going to be talking a fair amount, but there's plenty of space in the chat for thoughts or remarks or kind of follow-up pieces. So we'll be monitoring that. If you don't already have your name in the chat, since there's 76 of us, we're not going to go around and do introductions, but please just make sure you have your name in your image so that folks can see if you're talking and you're sharing ideas that they know who you are, at least by name. And if you think of it, share where you work or what your role is if you're asking a question. We can go to the next slide. The intention for today's training, the purpose is really to enhance our ability to provide excellence in service that will meet and exceed the needs of our intended audience. We have a number of constituents that we work with in our roles: students, families, faculty, staff, community members. And when we talk about excellence in service, we're talking about how we engage with all of our constituents, not just our students. We can go to the next slide. For our learning outcomes today, as a result of participating in this training, our intent is that you'll be able to define service excellence, that you'll be able to describe where and how service excellence fits within our guiding frameworks, explain our 3 behavioral concepts that move us towards service excellence, and then apply the content of the training to your role by way of being able to articulate challenges in achieving service excellence and setting some goals toward improvement. Go to the next slide. So first and foremost, what is service excellence in student affairs? When we say service excellence, what we mean is that we as a division are able to regularly meet and often exceed the expectations of our constituents. We'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about some of our guiding frameworks. I think it's worth acknowledging now that when we talk about expectations of our constituents, we do still need to further define what those expectations are. Where's the boundary of reasonable expectations? What are some of the intersections between our guiding frameworks of education, safety, development, and where does that connect with what would be a reasonable expectation for our constituents as well? It's less about satisfaction and more about respect, clarity, and making sure that if folks have issues that need to be resolved, that we're actively working to help them resolve those issues. So I imagine that in our discussion, this is where some of the challenges may lie in expectations, but know that we'll get down to kind of how we operationalize that term a little bit more here in a bit. And I think, yes. So our next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sawyer, who is going to set the stage for us in thinking about what our guiding frameworks are in service excellence in student affairs. Dr. Sawyer.
The framework for student affairs is truly the impact that we have on students. Students are the key word. That's it. The fact is, the work that we do and who we serve is all about them. And it is true that it's not always about necessarily the satisfaction survey. Sometimes we'll get folks that are not necessarily always happy with us because they were not happy with the answer. It doesn't mean, though, that we did not give them our ultimate, that we did not give them our best. So, service excellence really is trying to meet and exceed. So, first and foremost, we want to make sure that as we tie things in together, we start looking at the structure of what does it mean to be in student personnel and student personnel leadership. We have our strategic priorities that we know that we have in the Division of Student Affairs that is connected to then the strategic priorities of the university. We have our connected aims, which simply say from student affairs, how do we meet those needs that we have for this and of the strategies that are meeting the strategies and the outcomes of the university. We have our Seawolf commitment. That's more of our value part of us. That's the heart. And our professional competencies is simply how we do the work that we do. So these are really intersecting and concentric circles that really need to be connected to one another in terms of how we serve our students. Because I know that we're limited in terms of the time today, understand that as we serve our community, there are times where you may have heard that same argument, you may have heard the same story possibly 10 times that day. And you may be fed up and you may have actually had the most horrible interaction that morning, maybe with your puppy that went to the bathroom in the wrong place, with maybe your spouse or your significant other that you all did not have a good interaction before you both went to work. And yet at the same time, now you're dealing with a student who you've already heard the same thing 10 times in a row. And so our role is to make sure that we show up professionally. Our job is to make sure that it sounds like and feels like the first time that you've heard that story. And it's to make sure that we provide the best of us, that when we go into that space, that we show that student we genuinely and authentically care. And those are the things that we have to look at as we're interacting with students. The last thing I wanted to share with you is as we're doing this training, this is ongoing. And the idea is that for us, how can we be the best that we possibly can be and provide the best services to all of our students, faculty, staff, family, and other community members? Because that really is our role. And in so many other communities where you may see a business side of the house that's providing an answer, if people don't like it, then they end up going then to the next person up, or often they're sent to HR. In the roles that we have in student affairs, we technically are part of that HR community. We are the heart of an institution. We are that component of any university that reaches out to the families. Just this week alone, I've met with a couple of family members of individuals that were not very happy with us. And oftentimes, when it goes to the president, the first thing she does is sends it back then to student affairs, and she sends it back to Dr. Sawyer. You handle this. And the role is simply not to always to acquiesce. The idea is to help them to better understand the work that we do, why we do what we do. And so our exercise today, as we talk about service excellence, is really that. How do we then embed the work that we do, the values that we have, and we use those concentric pieces to be able to provide those students with what many of us would say is that cathartic, in some cases biblical, but do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Because we know we need a kinder world today. We need a more hopeful world today. And we need to treat each other with dignity and respect. And that's what service excellence is. And so I'm going to turn the program back over to Dr. Monet Polson and the rest of the team, but to let you know that as you're doing this good work, we need to have that. And sometimes it will be as though that you feel like you need to win the argument. You need to win that interaction. You don't. You just need to educate and inform in that space. You don't need to win. You need to be around for the next day so we can continue educating the student and other students and their family members. So thank you for all that you do and helping to Sonoma State to continue to be one of the most promising places to work in America. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Sawyer. And, setting the stage for this conversation around, kind of, what how we talk about these pieces, these components, and how we put them into practice. I think these are the kind of guiding frameworks that we hold in our hearts when we think about how we juggle the various expectations and the different constituents we may have. We can go on to the next slide. So next we're going to talk about how do we take these frameworks and put them into behavioral concepts. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. We are going to have three colleagues share some stories with you today that are exemplars of how we embody these three kind of key behavioral concepts. So I'm going to provide just an overview briefly, and then we'll hear from our colleagues. The first behavioral concept is make it easy to be a sea wolf. We started saying that more as we've been, considering how we can improve upon our organizational infrastructure, our efficiencies, not just our fiscal management, but also our business process. We've been pushed to improve some of our processes in this time, in this pandemic, but these are things that do improve upon the ease of a student to be a student here at Sonoma State. Now, I will clarify that the easy button doesn't mean that school is easy, and we are educators, and there's an important aspect of that educational process that sometimes does require us to support the student in discovering those answers themselves. What we're talking about is how do we make it easy to navigate the student process? How do we make it easy to navigate the financial aid process, the housing application process, the move-in process? There are a number of times when I engage with students where I say, let's get this figured out so you can get back to your homework, so you can get back to your classes, so that you can maybe spend a little more time reading that optional reading that the professor provided. So that's what we mean when we say make it easy to be a sea wolf. It doesn't mean make it easy to be, to get your classwork done, but just to streamline some of our processes and to make sure that it's easy for students to navigate. And when Koo shares her example, I think you'll see how it's more than just moving paperwork online, that there are a lot of things that we can do as practitioners to streamline that process. The second behavioral concept is your success is my success. And another way to put this is that we are only as strong as our weakest link. And that our weakest link isn't always someone who's not doing their job on purpose. Actually, it's very rarely that. It's folks who have more responsibilities than time. It's people who are filling vacant roles while doing their full-time job. I mean, many of us are doing things beyond the reality of how many hours there are in a day. So as we manage how much we can give to our workplace and what we could be or should be doing for our students, that we as a division are only as strong as our person who's struggling the most. And so the mindset around that is really to think about all of this work and the experience that students have on our campus, that we make their university experience what it is. And that when they see one of us, they see all of us. And so having that kind of broader attitude around kind of a shared responsibility and shared goals is one way of approaching moving us toward service excellence. And then the last one is that healthy relationships matter. We have constituents, like I said, from all over. And the way that we develop and maintain those relationships is an ongoing process. We as colleagues are, especially when we spend a lot of time with our coworkers, like family. That means sometimes we get on each other's nerves. Sometimes that means we disagree about important things. And having that relationship with one another and nurturing and respecting and fostering that relationship is a really important part to maintaining our service excellence. So you'll hear from Raina Penning, who's going to provide some great examples and tips for how we can foster those relationships. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to move into our first behavioral concept, which is make it easy to be a Seawolf. And we're going to hear from Ku Yang Vigil, who is the Educational Opportunity Program Coordinator. Ku, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me today, everyone. And really honored to be here with you all today. So earlier in our DSA meeting, we heard so many different examples of, what our students are going through during this pandemic. And so we know that our students come to the university with different responsibilities and stressors on top of their academics. And so how do we make that how do we make it easy to be a Seawolf for our students, especially during the challenging times we have been through and are still currently facing, such as the pandemic, recent fires, the Black Lives Matter movement, and elections? We want to make sure we are providing our students with excellence by showing them that they matter, that we'll be here to challenge and support them, as well as empower them to be advocates for themselves by showing them how to navigate as a college student and as an adult. And most importantly, that they're not alone in this journey here at SSU, and we are connecting them. And when we're connecting them to a campus partner, we're doing it in a way where we are doing that soft handoff to our campus partner. And again, just showing our students the way. So an example of this excellence was when I worked with a first year student last year who moved to Sonoma State University from Southern California, leaving her comfort zone and her support system. And the transition was really hard for her, leaving, and her father's passing, the anniversary of his passing, was around the corner, and fitting and finding a new support system was a challenge. And so we had our Summer Bridge Fall Welcome, and later that day, the student actually ended up harming herself and was taken to the hospital on a 5150 hold. And as her EOP advisor, I was able to build a relationship with her during Summer Bridge. And so I was that constant for her, that support system in this new transition for her. And so I worked closely with the SSU care team, the DSA executive leadership team to ensure that the student was taken care of during her stay at the hospital, connecting with her. I visited her at the hospital, and one thing that comes up for me is, for those of you who know Dr. Michael Young, when he was here, his interim role as VP of Student Affairs, he always said, you are taking care of somebody's baby. And so for me, having children myself, I understand, if my children went off somewhere, I would want someone to take care of my baby the way I would take care of my baby. So I helped to navigate making sure that the confidentiality release forms were signed. So there was open communication between SSU, CAPS, and the medical facilities, the hospitals that the students was at. And in the words of Dr. LMP, I took on that role of a social worker and wasn't just an EOP advisor focusing on academics. It was, that holistic support for the student, connecting her with the campus resources and making sure that she knew who to contact, where to go when she was back on campus. And so I continuously checked on to that student. And so again, it goes back to making sure the student knows that she has a support system in providing that service and excellence. And so I know all of you here today have a story to tell on how you've helped make it easy to be a Seawolf and made things a little bit easier and less daunting for students here at Sonoma State. And so again, thank you for letting me share my story with you.
Thank you so much, Ku. We appreciate it. Our next person we're going to hear from to share a story about or an example of your success is my success is Anna Reynolds Smith. She was unable to join us today, so she recorded her story for us. We can go ahead and get that going.
Hello, all. I've been asked to briefly share an example of your success is my success. And as I think about this, many examples come to mind for me of times when we've come together as a division or a campus to help ensure that an event, experience, service is a success. such as maybe commuter days, where people from different areas come together to welcome the students back. Career days with setting up the event, checking attendees in, and cleanup, which is one of my favorite assignments actually, because not many people will actually sign up for that cleanup duty. Seawolf Decision Day is another example where we try to make an overall experience for our prospective students and their families. Move-in weekend, whether it is greeting families, welcoming them in the residential communities, or just encoding cards and trying not to mess up too badly for our friends in housing that they would then have to correct it in the following weeks. Sorry, Liz. Midnight breakfast in Zinfandel, and then when we all got too old for midnight breakfast, it was considered late night breakfast, which was at a more reasonable hour. Commencement and many more examples. But there is one that really sticks out in my memory strongly, perhaps because we were cutting things very close, but I think it is also because many folks from different departments all came together to help get Cabernet ready for our students to move in. So it was back in the summer of 2015, which seems like light years away, but Liz assures me that's when it took place. And an extensive remodel renovation was being completed on Cabernet Village. Unfortunately, as many construction projects go, this one was behind schedule, and the housing team was keeping a very careful eye on the progress and monitoring the project status as closely as possible. However, as move-in weekend was rapidly approaching, it did not look like the facilities would be ready until past move-in weekend, unless we could get some extra help. With limited options and knowing that the students and families would be arriving soon in eager anticipation of delivering their things, meeting their roommates, saying goodbye to their loved ones, and starting on that wonderful college experience, it became an all hands on deck call out for support to assist with getting Cabernet ready to welcome our students. People from all different departments came in to help with moving debris, getting furniture in place, maybe sometimes even putting together some furniture, noting if things were missing, perhaps a hutch was missing in a particular room, or just going through each of the rooms and doing the punch list check to see what other construction or touch-up paint, for example, needed to be done. Although it was an incredibly stressful time, especially for campus housing and residential life teams, as they were referred to at the time, it was one of those times when everyone came together, working as a unified team to meet one specific goal, which was to prepare our campus to welcome our students. Now, I'm not saying that everything got completed and the project was 100% finalized prior to move-in. However, we were able to successfully get the place into a state that would allow most of the students to move in as scheduled. I think of this time for many reasons, but I know that as a result of this one experience and unified effort, I personally created stronger relationships with people in areas whom I did not regularly interact with or work with on a day-to-day basis, which help enhance my abilities to do my regular day-to-day work now. And it was reflective of the many different areas all coming together to support a common goal, working together to get the residential community ready for our students, which was ultimately a success for housing, but also a success for all of us. This is an example of a large-scale unified effort, and I know that we all do these on a much smaller scale on a day-to-day basis. But I think the idea and overall lesson is to try to incorporate this type of teamwork into our everyday jobs to figure out ways of how we can all work together to better serve our students and support our campus, because ultimately your success is my success. And the more we work together as a team, whether it be in these large team efforts, such as this example with Cabernet, or smaller team efforts that happen on a day-to-day basis, the more we can support each other, the more we can support our students. Thank you.
All right. Well, I don't need to add anything to that, and I know we're already at time. And so to make sure Raina has all the time she needs to share her story, we'll move straight on to Raina Penning, who is our Manager of Outreach and Academic Services, to share with us about why healthy relationships matter. Raina, take it away.
Thank you. So I'm going to speak just a little bit to the importance of our relationships across student affairs. Working in pre-collegiate programs, our primary constituents, of course, like all of you, are the students, but we also have close relationships with parents, school and district partners, and community-based organizations as well that we have to maintain professional relationships with. My mantra here really is collaboration, not competition. So in approaching my relationships with my constituents, the main one being Pioneer High School, in the case of my program, I really like to come at it from an angle that I'm here to understand their unique needs. I'm here to work together with them, not to impose my ideas or my way of thinking that things should be done. So it's really more of a negotiation than it is anyone trying to impose one particular way or another. I work really hard to maintain a presence on campus. So during normal times, rather than just kind of hiding in my classroom space, I really make an effort to get out, walk around, visit the office as much as I can. And I know that we all have those days when we're just slammed and busy and feel like we can't get away from our desks. But even on those days, I really try to remember the importance of getting out beyond my workspace and seeing people and connecting with people. During our time of pandemic and distance learning and remote working, I still maintain that presence by participating in as many Pioneer staff meetings and committee meetings as I possibly can, just to remind everyone that the program is still present on campus, even if we're not all physically here. And then I also really make an effort to maintain relationships at all levels of the campus. So I have good, solid professional relationships with the principal, with the rest of the administrative team, with teachers, with counselors, but also with custodians. Those are some of my strongest relationships where I know that if I need something, they know who I am and they're willing to help me with what I need. And then to return briefly to that idea of our success is your success, one thing I like to say and remind people of is that we all have the same goal. And for all of us, that goal is serving our students and doing it in the best way we can. And for that goal to be achieved, we need mutual success. So again, that ties back into that idea of collaboration, not competition. If we're competing against each other and at odds with each other constantly, our students are not going to be successful because they won't be receiving 100% of the support that they need. Whereas if we're all working together as a team and our students know that we're here for them and we're not here for personal drama or other issues, they're going to feel from us the support that they need in order to ultimately be successful in reaching their goals.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Raina. Thanks to all three of our speakers who provided examples. I couldn't stop smiling because it's just really cool to hear all the excellent work and the ways that we frame the work that we do and the decisions that we make. And you all are excellent examples of this in our division. I want to make sure we have some time for some conversation together. If you could write in the chat for these next two questions, What are some of the challenges? Now that we've talked about this, we talked about these kind of three main ideas. It's clear that they're not mutually exclusive, they overlap. And thinking about what Dr. Sawyer had said earlier around these guiding frameworks, what are some of the challenges that we face when putting these behavioral concepts into practice? What are some of the times where it's really difficult to make these things happen? Um, and kind of along with that, what are some of the ways that these challenges can be addressed? So go ahead and use the chat, and I'll keep an eye on it and kind of call out what I'm seeing, folks sharing. And thanks to everyone who's been providing kudos in the chat as well. So again, the question is, what are some of the challenges that we face when putting these behavioral concepts into practice? I see pride. Caitlin shared pride is a challenge at times, quite often. Livia, policy is a huge challenge sometimes. Michael says practice to bridge theoretical and practical, that there are sometimes some conflicts with that. Time is a big one, certainly. These things all do take time, right? They're important. But time is a resource that we often don't have. Challenges, pride, confrontation, always trying to streamline processes and update them as students and campuses need change, not taking things personally. That's an important one. Coming in very quickly now, so I'm not going to read all of them. And then, what are some of the ways that these challenges can be addressed? So I see streamlining processes and adjusting to new student leads. Staying up to date on resources and services is important. Breathe, says Rachel. Keeping communication open, absolutely. So actually, as I'm reading a lot of these, I'm not totally sure if they are challenges or how they can be addressed. In some ways, they're both, right? Breathing is a challenge, and how we can address some of these things. Policy and time, those are all things that we struggle with. And the real goal in asking these questions and having an opportunity to share some of these pieces is to just get that out there and to acknowledge that there are often moments where we know what we want to be doing and we may have some real challenges with that. And I liked how Raina put kind of this idea of a mantra that when we have some of these phrases in the back of our heads and we're trying to decide, do we do this or do we do this, that these are some of the ways that we can guide what we do with our actions and our behavior, or maybe advocate for things that we need, that this is something I really value. And I'm struggling to find the time or the space, or I'm finding that I'm running up against policies that are making it difficult, and help me solve this problem with this goal in mind. Next thing, I'm going to, kind of move us along so we have time for for our dyads. We're going to break you into groups of 2, and we're going to focus on kind of continuing on with this idea of challenges. We're going to break you into groups of 2, and you'll have each 1 minute to share your thoughts on each question. So for those of you who are familiar with dyads, the idea is that your partner will talk for a minute and you will talk for a minute, uninterrupted, so that you each have 1 whole minute to share your thoughts around these ideas. For the discussion questions, we will share them in the slide and in the chat. So we have 2 questions we'd like you to spend time with your partner discussing. Describe a time when you implemented one of these behavioral concepts in practice, and then name 1 thing from this training that you'll apply to your work in the future. So something new or something that you'd like to recommit to, something from our colleagues' stories that resonated with you, that helped you think about ways that you could do something differently or better in the future. So give us just a couple seconds to move you into groups. So you'll be in your groups for about 4 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll close out. We can go ahead and move to the last slide. Yes, Cookie, we will be able to access the slides, and we have recorded this session. So once we're able to get it captioned, we will be posting it on Engage for folks to complete on their own time or review again if they would like. This is the QR code for our post-training assessment. I hope you all had a good experience and had a good time talking with your colleagues about some of the challenges with service excellence. I know that in my dyad, it was clear that there are things that are wonderful about these ideas and similarly challenging. In the post-training assessment, you will be asked to share a little bit about what some of those goals were that you may have communicated with your dyad partner. And so in the interest of time, I will let you all go with a narrow 5 minutes over time. So thank you as always for your patience. And the last thing that I will say is once you are marked as attended, you will be receiving a feedback survey about this training. And so please do complete that as well. The questionnaires you completed today were our pre and post assessment, but the feedback survey will be about the facilitators and the structure and the time and the value that you saw out of it. So, and yes, we will put the link for the post assessment. We'll keep this forum open for about 5-10 more minutes so folks can access it. And I just thank you all for your time.